you're not alone as a clinician. Find your tribe. There are products out there that are helpful. Anytime I have a consultation with a doc, I make sure they leave with my personal cell phone number. So we make ourselves available to the folks that we are serving, and we are serving the doctors. So we want to talk to clinicians who are treating patients, not the patients. We want to be supportive of the clinicians, and we do make ourselves available to that. I highly recommend people stay with their clinician during this. You need a clinician to really evaluate how you're doing, and this is only one tool in the toolbox. That clinician has so many other tools that they can mix and match. My encouragement for patients or clients is don't do this on your own, and my encouragement for physicians is don't be afraid of it. There's nothing to be afraid of here.
And you're listening to the Docpreneur Leadership Podcast. Today, we have part 2 of our special series on the endocannabinoid system. And we're going to talk today with 3 experts about long-haul COVID, the endocannabinoid system, the research around it, and building evidence-based medicine with case studies and around the ECS research. And we're going to answer a lot of questions today. Our guests include, we have Chris Lundwall. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at Endourage, and we'll put the links of each of the individuals' contact information in the show notes below. We also have Dr. Michael.steward with us, and we're going to go into their backgrounds here and their bios briefly in just a moment, or you can go back to part 1. And we also have Isaac Foster, the CEO at Endourage. And you can go, if you're curious, if you're just got a minute, you can go to Xltran.com. That's Xltran.com is one link. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us to discuss a really important topic.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes, thank you for having us, Michael.
All right, so I'm going to pivot over to Dr. Steward first with our first question of the day, and that is, what is long-haul COVID today? Where is it trending? And talk a little also about early treatment of long-haul COVID to alleviate any of those, kind of myths and misconceptions or fear out there about long COVID.
Well, long COVID is what we're calling folks who have had a COVID infection and 3 months after they've had it are still having symptoms. And there are a variety of symptoms that folks can have. I think the brain fog and fatigue are probably 2 of the most common and significant issues with long COVID. It appears that about 1 of 2 people who have COVID will develop long COVID symptoms in varying degrees of severity. The variant, or whether you had the Delta variant or an original variant infection, does not seem to matter. It doesn't seem to matter if you had a significant COVID infection or a mild one, that you can still develop long COVID. The thing that does seem to help folks from developing long COVID is if they have received early treatment for COVID-19. So we're talking to a group of physicians, and so I would just really invite physicians to really take a look and brush up on their protocols for early COVID-19 treatment.
I'm going to pivot over to you, Isaac, and then you'll add some context, Chris. Isaac, tell us a little bit about your experience, what Endourage is doing with long COVID, about Xltran, and just give us a brief overview.
So my background, 10 years on Wall Street, mostly as an investment banker, 4 years focused in the drug development process of biotech and pharma, and then 20 years in startups. And so long COVID for us and following it is really a second pandemic that's right in the wake of COVID. The interesting thing is there are other papers that are being published that are looking further and further out. And unfortunately, the further and further out they're looking, the higher and higher the incidence of long COVID is. And so while it's absolutely important early intervention treatment, we see the last piece of the puzzle is helping the long haulers. And the good news is we've done the trial, we have the formulation, we have a very effective, inexpensive tool for physicians that are treating long COVID patients, we believe, to get them back to their pre-COVID life.
Chris, I'll let you expand on that. But if you want to introduce yourself to the physician audience, what your role is with this team, and put some context around that question as well.
Yeah, happy to. My role in the team is to delight physicians with the experience they have with Endourage. My career has been spent bringing disruptive technologies to market, tip of the spear type of operations, and I've just really been blessed to be able to reach some billion-dollar milestones with some of those initiatives. And not unlike this situation, we have an amazing technology and an amazing value proposition for physicians that literally can help patients almost immediately. And so we're very excited, and I'm very excited to be a part of this amazing team. As it relates to long COVID, one of my roles is I'm in direct contact with over 600 physicians nationwide who are impacted by or treating long COVID. That spans about 192 post-COVID care centers. And it's really been quite humbling to talk to them over the past 6 to 8 months about where they're coming from and how they see long COVID, because they don't have a standard of care. I mean, to be candid, we're just trying to get our arms around COVID, right? And then we come up with this long COVID symptom, which is right now, there's over 60 different indications that have been used to describe long COVID, and the incidence is what's been mentioned already. So what I've been hearing from physicians when we speak with them is, number one, they're thrilled that we are trying to give them evidence-based medicine for a new pandemic, if you will, as it relates to long COVID. There's universal feedback, almost universal feedback, that there is no standard of care. They don't know what to do. They're trying to define it. There's a level of desperation, and maybe that's a strong word, but I should flip it upside down and say there's a huge amount of interest in novel therapeutics that will have an impact in the short term, that are completely safe and aligned with the expectations as it relates to research and clinical trials.
Wow, that is encouraging. And I'm excited to know that there are physicians out there that have enough time, have enough, foresight into the future, that they're investigating things that otherwise would be out of their comfort zone or out of their wheelhouse. Dr. Stewart, I'm going to pivot over to you, and then I'll move over to Isaac and back to Chris for question number 2. And that is, Dr. Stewart, you're a physician. How are physicians and patients responding to long COVID patients? I mean, actually, how are physicians responding to long COVID patients, I should say?
Well, I know initially when we had this podcast, not this summer before, where we were working with the long haulers, that was the initial group where long haulers wasn't a common name yet. Most physicians at that point in time didn't know what to do. And the feedback we were getting from these, the folks that were seeing the physicians asking for help, was that they were being told this was in their head, it couldn't be going on, they were being marginalized, given antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications, and sent home. That has certainly changed. I think that physicians now recognize this is something that is very real. And I think that they're frustrated in that we're not talking yet about how to treat this in groups. We're still trying to figure out what to do with COVID, and now we've got post-acute COVID syndrome. So I think we're in the very early stages of this, and being able to have a forum and an ability to talk about what's working and what's not is a valuable tool for physicians. And we're really in that very early information gathering place. We happen to have a clinical trial that's got supportive data. I think that gives us a heads up or a head start on some other therapeutics that might be out there that are still being investigated. But my hope is that at least we have something that's starting to work and that we're spurring conversations with other docs, then that they understand this is real. And as we start to have some modalities to help make those tools the docs are already using work better, I hope we continue to explore this.
All right, and before I jump off to Isaac, are you excited about what you're hearing when you converse with physicians about this? About like, yeah, we got something that's really going to help you and your patients in your local community. Like this is the start of something unique.
The response that we've gotten, especially now that we have a cannabinoid-free preparation, is, can you talk to our research team? Can we get involved in these clinical trials? Whereas before, it was very difficult to even get through the institution to be able to talk to a clinician. A lot of what's going on right now is that folks are trying to work and have busy schedules with a full day in clinic, and they don't have time to be looking at different alternatives, or at least many of them. So the cannabinoids in our preparation was certainly something that slowed us down for a long time. And to have a cannabinoid-free preparation, we're really seeing docs get excited about getting on board, helping us gather this information. As I say, we've got some calls here scheduled already to talk to the research team so that we can get these case studies moving, and our principal investigator is gearing up to be able to handle that too. So I'm really excited about that. And again, the response that I've gotten now from folks that were cannabinoid free and their willingness to at least explore that is really exciting.
And Isaac, I'm going to pivot over to you, but I'm going to add one more thing to the context that I want you to bring around this. And Chris, you can add to this as well. Dr. Steward, feel free to pipe in towards the end. When I speak with physicians, especially those in primary care, in family medicine, they feel like they're sometimes the last ones to get the tools to be able to put into their toolbox. Tell us a little bit about how your team is providing those tools, what those tools are, and how you're resourcing those, smaller physicians or smaller practices, I should say.
And this is a great question, and it's why we're so excited to be here, right? So one of the challenges that we have as a company is navigating the FDA requirements, right? And if you think about FDA approval, it gives you two basic things. One, the legal right to sell a product, and two, the legal right to publicly proclaim its use. That isn't worth $2.3 billion to us because, one, we have the right to sell our product. Our product is legal. It's manufactured in accordance with the 2018 Farm Bill, which means that from the state of Colorado, it's legal for purchase and sale, even the cannabinoid version, anywhere in the United States. So because of these challenges around the FDA, we have created a clinician-only website. And that's why we need to go through a registration process. We need to verify that they are in fact clinicians. But once we have done that, Xltran.com is the reservoir of all the information that we have aggregated, and it's presented in a way that's very easy for physicians to access. And it can be as surface level as, here's the 3 steps you need to use this in your practice, down to actual charts, graphs, data, and also excitingly, over the course of the next couple of years, we do think there will be many publications that come out. And again, we're inviting clinicians to participate at this time. So the way that we're helping the small practitioner is by working on protocols with the larger sites, proving it out there, sharing that data at larger sites with clinicians who may have a smaller collection of long COVID patients or COVID patients that they're looking to treat. And so they have the same access as the large institutions do to our information once we confirm they're a clinician.
Great. Chris, anything you would like to also add to that context?
I think I'd just add really briefly that in our conversations with these physicians and these large research institutions that we're currently in conversation and collaboration with, there seems to be an extremely positive shift in terms of how the physicians are looking at therapeutics. Historically, medicine has been kind of focused on single molecule medicine, which obviously creates a patent opportunity and runs into the current medical system. I think what I've been hearing and feeling is that these physicians, many of these physicians, they're not just technicians who are just trying to diagnose and prescribe. And I think very much like your physicians, your concierge docs, they're really looking for solutions, and they're very open to multi-molecule solutions.
Mhm.
And I think there's a big shift that's moving the reach of pharma into multi-molecule solutions like this plant, because they realize that there's tremendous value in learning more about what it's done historically, but they're also seeing that single molecule medicine does create a gap in terms of the healing paradigms and protocols. So I think there's kind of something very, very cool going on with how innovative and open many of these doctors are to multi-molecule medicine, especially hemp-derived therapeutics.
Dr. Stewart, I know I've been doing this long enough to know that you probably have something else to add that you wanted to throw in there. So before I jump to the next question, I'll let you conclude this one.
Well, for the smaller groups that are out there, we have to recognize that a lot of docs out there just are going to be late adopters. They are going to wait for the government agencies to give them recommendations, and they are only going to follow a standard of care. And by definition, standard of care is old medicine because it's the medicine we did and we think it's good. So it's become the standard of care. Then there are going to be physicians out there that are going to be early adopters, and they're going to say, wait a minute, you have something that's safe, you have evidence-based medicine to support it, it's inexpensive, and I can use it now. I'm all in. I'm going to do that. And those are the docs that we're trying to get in these case studies. And then, of course, there are going to be some docs out there that are kind of in between. So trying to find the doctors who are open-minded enough. I still think the majority of my colleagues fall into the late adopter series. But obviously, concierge docs are different. Concierge docs get to spend a little more time with their clients. They're concierge docs for a reason. And I find them to generally fall into the category of the early adopters. Now, how do we get in touch with them? We get in touch with them, for example, by working with a group that reaches out to folks that are interested in functional medicine approaches. So we've been sort of getting in front of those Western docs that are interested in us by going down the group of people that are also incorporating functional medicine practices into their practice. It is a little more difficult to reach out and be able to connect with the smaller physician, because if I do a cold call to their office, they don't take my call. So I have to figure out a way to have a group that they already respect present information about Endourage to them. And if any of your concierge docs have an idea about how we can get in front of more like-minded people, I am all ears. I think the larger institutions are a little easier for us to get their attention. But I am excited about working with smaller groups of docs, and we are trying to figure out how to get in front of them in an effective way. And I think we're slowly doing it, but it's not quick.
Yeah.
And I understand why. You know, so many people are getting badgered today by the latest and greatest trend that's out there, and we really are a company that's doing research-based formulations. We're not out there to try to put out products that are not safe. Our products are not overpriced. So we're doing what I know how to do to get in front of these smaller groups, but it is difficult. And
it is. And I find that with the concierge physician community, even though it is somewhat unique, members telling them years ago at our conferences is, one day my dream is that others outside of healthcare and inside of healthcare will look at what you're doing in this lake, this pond called concierge care, your early adoption, your entrepreneurial, your hospitality, your delight, as Chris mentioned. And even in the innovation and precision medicine and PGX and biomes and all this type of things that they're looking into, that others are now starting to look at that and starting to say, you know what, I don't necessarily want all of that model, but I think I like what they're doing in this particular part of it. So moving on to the next question, the part 3 of this question of our 5-part questions today. I'll move on to you, Chris, first, and then Isaac and Dr. Steward. The mechanisms of action. What is Xltran's mechanisms of action for many of these long COVID symptoms? How's it dosed? Drug to drug interactions. You're the missionary of delight, so to speak, Chris. So what are some of the questions that physicians are calling you with, bumping into, or related to this bigger question?
Yeah, I'll certainly defer to the dosing instruction and guidance to Dr. Mike. But what we're hearing from the physicians about Xltran specifically is the enthusiasm that comes from knowing that you've got a non-cannabinoid therapeutic for long COVID. Keep in mind that your large institutional hospitals, research hospitals in urban areas have literally thousands of long COVID patients in the queue that they don't know how to treat. And then you can pop out to a local, a rural center that we're working with in Michigan that's got 200. They are being pushed and prodded and need a way to treat long COVID symptoms quickly. And when you talk about Xltran Plus, which has cannabinoids, that enters into a more complicated conversation along with the large institutionals. It doesn't change the frustration that the docs have and they want something to use right away. But as it relates to Xltran and essentially why there's a high degree of enthusiasm, number one, it's available. Number two, there's no safety concerns whatsoever. Those have all been validated. Number three, it's backed up by a clinical trial. And number three, it's extremely accessible and priced extremely well. So I would say that the amount of enthusiasm I'm seeing is through the roof. Again, in the absence of a standard of care, especially with your concierge physicians who are innately more open and more healer maybe than technician, if I could say that, as it relates to how they approach medicine. I think this is an exciting message. But as it relates to dosing and those types of things, I would certainly defer to Dr. Mike.
Well, let's have you close out this question related to mechanisms of action. How's it dosed, the drug-to-drug interactions? Dr. Steward, you're the clinician in the room here. Talk to us a little bit about for inflammation, for fatigue, for body muscle, migraine pain.
Sure.
Any general instructions or interactions?
Yeah. Well, this mechanism of action is actually kind of interesting. And now expand on that just a little bit here, because cannabis, or even, Xltran is also balancing the endocannabinoid system through the terpenes that have direct CB2 receptor activation. And so our products do balance the endocannabinoid system. And as such, in many ways, they act much more like a nutrient in low doses than they do a medicine. For example, if you come down with the disease scurvy, it's due to a vitamin C deficiency. If we give you a small amount of vitamin C, that disease will go away. Scurvy will go away. And if you want to use vitamin C as an anti-inflammatory to treat the osteoarthritis in your knees, you're going to have to go up on the dose. And most of the times with vitamin C, the dose you have to go up on, instead of 250 milligrams, is going to be 25 grams. You have to give it IV slowly. And so we don't use it as an anti-inflammatory very often, but vitamin C is both a nutrient in low doses and anti-inflammatory at higher doses. In low doses, our products balance the endocannabinoid system. And if all you need is a little bit of balance in your endocannabinoid system, a few milligrams of our products are going to do the trick. You might not even need to take them every day. You could take them every other day. You're just balancing your endocannabinoid system, like you might have had a little bit of a vitamin C deficiency. You have a little bit of balance needed for your endocannabinoid system, and we can help with that. Then when you need to use this plant as a medicine, as an anti-seizure medication, for example, you may have to go up on the dose significantly. Not quite so much depending upon pain control. If you're needing to actually use this as an anti-inflammatory, we do need to go up on the doses higher. And with people with post-acute COVID syndrome, we don't really know where they are on this continuum. Is this just balancing their endocannabinoid system, or do we really need to be an anti-inflammatory? Do we need to be an antidepressant? Do we need to be a bronchodilator? Because we can be all of those things. Our terpene selection is such that they interact with the receptors that open up the airways, that attenuate inflammation, that help with depression. We have a couple of terpenes in there that have clinically been shown that when they're infused into a depression ward, people's depression scores go up, they get better. The beautiful thing about dosing this for post-acute COVID syndrome is we keep it very simple. It is 1 ml or 1 dropper 3 times a day with meals for a week, and then follow up with your doctor. That's a really good dose in that it's going to be effective for most people. At the week follow-up, we're going to find some people who didn't respond. And those people who didn't respond, who want to try a higher dose, it's incredibly safe. We can go higher on the dose. We're going to find people who've responded fully. And in that case, we may be able to discontinue the medication or even reduce the dose. And then we're going to find people who've either had an inadequate response in which we can go up on the doses, or they might have said, you know what, this bothers me. I don't like the way that I feel when I'm taking this. And if they don't like the way they feel when they're taking it, but have had some resolution of their symptoms, again, we can try cutting their dose in half, or we can just discontinue the medication. So dosing is very easy to start off. It's 1 dropper 3 times a day with meals. And then let's follow up and find out how the client is doing. And then we adjust that dosage based on their response. And again, you may find that you can go with very low doses in certain people who just need a little balance for their endocannabinoid system. And then for those folks that were reaching out and really being an antidepressant or a bronchodilator or an anti-inflammatory, any of those things, we may need to go up on the dose. So we start off fairly low, we go slow in our dosing, and we don't have to be afraid to go all the way because we're not going to hurt anybody. If somebody gets to be taking, 2 or 3 droppers twice a day, it's probably not going to work if they go up on the dose higher than that. It's not going to hurt them, but it's not going to work. And so a clinician needs to recognize when it's time to say, hey guys, we've given this a try for 30 days and you're not responding. Unfortunately, it's not going to work for everyone, but it's going to work for a whole lot of people. We also highly recommend people stay with their clinician during this. You need a clinician to really evaluate how you're doing. And this is only one tool in the toolbox. That clinician has so many other tools that they can mix and match. My encouragement for patients or clients is don't do this on your own. And my encouragement for physicians is don't be afraid of it. There's nothing to be afraid of here.
Hey, Dr. Mike, could you speak for just a minute about that none of our products are habit forming or psychotropic?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to have. All of our products, when they contain the cannabinoids, have a CBD to THC ratio so that the products will not create euphoria or intoxication. I'm not using the term psychoactive here because our products do have the ability to attenuate anxiety. And if you have the ability to attenuate anxiety, you are by definition psychoactive. We are not euphoric or create intoxication. But because we can help people with anxiety, we are by definition psychoactive, but not habit forming. So there are no studies that show that CBD dominant cannabinoid preparations have any habit forming tendencies to them. So they're safe, they're not habit forming. We do not create euphoria or intoxication. And we have products now for people that need to be drug tested that they will have a clean drug test on those because they do not contain any cannabinoids. I can't guarantee they'll have a clean drug test, but I can guarantee my product doesn't contain the cannabinoids that would interfere with the clean drug test.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Steward, for that education and that very helpful and thorough explanation, I think, for physicians listening. Our final question, and I'll start with you, Isaac, move to Chris, and then conclude with Dr. Steward is, let's talk a little bit about how can concierge doctors learn more about Xltran and for their long COVID patients. What's the next steps? We'll put the links, by the way, for those listening and watching over the next few weeks and months about this interview is we'll put the links in the show notes below. But you can go to XL, like it said, Xltran, TRAN as in Nancy.com, and register as a clinician to obtain access to a wealth of information, protected information I'm reading here. Also, Endourage.com. We'll put that in the links below. But Isaac, let's start with you. What are the next steps you want physicians to take from your perspective?
Oh, this is the question the CEO loves, right?
Mhm.
Especially when the person's on the phone. You've met Chris. Chris is everybody's POC, point of contact, for clinicians, right? He's got a staff, he's got a team, but he deals with all the clinicians directly. He doesn't pawn them off to staff. And so your first action, if you are interested in anything you've heard today, should be to email Chris. And his email address is very simple. It's his first name, Chris, at endourage.com.
Great.
And I've emailed him in the middle of the night and he's responded. Not promising that, just letting you know it can happen.
That's a big ask right there. Chris, we'll move over to you. You are working with the physicians closely. What next steps do you want the physicians to take? Maybe it's a personal step, maybe it's a research and education step. But what do you want to see them do next?
I would love for them just to go to Xltran.com and register. And in that registration process, I'll reach out to them. I will speak with them personally. I will understand how their practice works and how we can delight them with Xltran specifically and Xltran Plus if they want to move to a cannabinoid inclusive product. But every relationship is unique and it's extremely important. And the doctors that we work with, they're the full spectrum, Michael. They are, the rural docs in a rural clinic that are being overrun by long COVID, and in contrast to not having enough resources. I speak with doctors, in large institutions that have taken an integrative approach. So they come in, a long COVID patient comes in and they've got 9 symptoms. And now they're going to see 9 doctors with 9 different prescriptions, and that gets pretty confusing. And, when we were doing the podcast with the long haulers last year, the frustration and desperation that we heard from those patients, because they got to a point where they had so many different paths that they were really getting lost in all the meds that they were taking. So I think the message I have, especially to your concierge physicians, is who I really consider to be healers more than maybe technicians per se. But if they're open to innovative therapeutics that are backed by science and research, please contact me at chris@endourage.com. And they will get a phone call and we'll have a brief conversation. I'll respect their time, I always do. But getting them registered and onboarded is a fairly straightforward process. And our ability to get Xltran in their hands to alleviate the growing backlog of long COVID patients and reduce the number of really perhaps unnecessary prescriptions and tests, I think can be a tremendous value to them.
Thank you for that. And our guest today, before we hit Dr. Steward one last time, our guests today have been Dr. Michael Steward, Chief Medical Officer at Endourage, Chris Lundwall, the Chief Revenue Officer at Endourage, and we also have with us Isaac Foster, the CEO of Endourage. You can go to endourage.com or Endourage, ENDOURAGE.com if you're listening and want to hit that up on your smart device. But our final question really is the same question, but this is, Dr. Steward, your kneecap to kneecap intimate moment with physicians listening and learning is, this is just your moment to give them a little bit of hope to say, you know what, this is an important topic. You're doing you've been working really, really hard this last couple of years. And it's something that you don't prepare for in medical school. And you're resourcing them in such a unique way with these products and with the research that you've done. What would you tell someone who's just shaking his head or her head, frustrated, and just saying, I don't know what to do next. And I've got all these patients who are now going to be suffering in my practice, in my community for years with this. And I don't feel supported. I don't feel supported by my associations. I don't feel supported by my societies. I don't feel supported by my peers. And what would you tell some of them in their next steps?
Well, I understand that's going on a lot, and don't be afraid to go back to your basics. Have that free flow of information right now for some reason, but you're not alone as a clinician. Find your tribe. There are products out there that are helpful. Anytime I have a consultation with a doc, I make sure they leave with my personal cell phone number. So we make ourselves available to the folks that we are serving, and we are serving the doctors. So we want to talk to clinicians who are treating patients, not the patients. We want to be supportive of the clinicians, and we do make ourselves available to that. I generally can respond usually within a few minutes when people send me a text, but almost always within the day. So we are there to provide support. Don't feel unsupported. There are people out there to help you. Go back to the basics and treat the symptoms if you need to, looking for that underlying thing that's going on, which is going to be something involving inflammation.
Well, that brings up one final caveat question to this, because we do find that some of those early adopter physicians sometimes like to try things before they introduce things to their patients.
Right.
Are you finding that physicians themselves are taking some of these in the trials, or
what absolutely has been? Yeah, and if physicians want to try our products, we're happy to send them products too. Okay. And we have physicians who use our products as well as their clients, of course.
Great. Well, we'll put all the contact information for Dr. Steward, Chris, Isaac, for how to get in touch with them, for the literature and the research that they've talked about in the last couple of episodes. Your team is doing amazing things. And I know that the physicians, weeks, days, months, years from now, are going to look back and think that your team has really just moved a mountain with relation to bringing evidence and showing the physicians out there the evidence to be able to treat long COVID, and within a really unique way. And so thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for what your team is doing. Thank you for coming around. And Dr. Steward, thank you for being such a forefront leader as a physician to wrap around the business side with Chris and Isaac, because that's something that's just so needed, the innovation out there in healthcare, because often that innovation is squelched or squashed, so to speak, and it doesn't see the light of day. So we're appreciative, and I know physicians listening will be appreciative of all that you, Chris, Isaac, and Dr. Steward, all that you guys have done. And as we say around here, it's no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. It's about being the best doctor for the world, for your patients, and for your local community. Thanks, guys, for being with us today.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.